joining me now is Viv Govender from Rand Swiss Offshore to give us his take on the market's activity. Viv, thanks so much for your time this afternoon. Now, why are markets so downbeat? Why is it red across the board? One would think that everything is working out in equity markets' favor. We have the US-China trade war or trade truce, that is, a Fed rate cut and a fairly upbeat tech earnings coming through this week as well.
Yeah, look, I mean, we are seeing some things, I think, just turning around a little bit because of, like the gold price, for instance, in local markets has been under pressure, and that's kind of like, brought us down a little bit. The tech market, I think, yeah, we did have some good news, we did some bad news, but we had some very bad news from Meta, and that was down 10%, and that kind of like hurt the US markets yesterday. Today, I think these could be a bit different. I think Amazon's numbers looking very, very strong. S&P futures are looking quite strong, and they're coming back up about 0.2%. Amazon is looking to have a massive rally today, if the futures are to be believed. So you might see a turnaround there. But I think when it comes to our market, I do think that the gold price going briefly below. I think it's right now just slightly above or just flirting with $4,000 an ounce. Remember, we were going closer to $4,400 an ounce recently, and I think that could have been something that's really moved the market as well over the last week or so.
Let's zoom in on those tech earnings we saw coming out overnight. You mentioned Amazon there, AWS, really strong despite the disruption we got last week. Looking at Apple's numbers as well, iPhone sales giving the counter a boost. Just zooming in on Apple in particular, it's been in a tight spot for quite some time due to tariffs as well as falling behind when it comes to innovation, particularly AI. Has sentiment shifted? Quite a substantial recovery in the share price. We also saw it join the $4 trillion market cap club.
Yeah, look, I mean, to a certain extent it has. It's recovered quite nicely from the bottom of the Liberation Day struggles we saw in April. It's up about almost 45% since that point, and probably higher today because aftermarket the results were released, so close close to 50% in the next couple of days. But I do think that this is from the lows of April, of course. But I do think that Apple is the one tech company that's basically going counterintuitively and kind of avoiding the AI bubble. The thing with Apple is that people don't realize it because often people think that Apple innovates a lot. It really doesn't. Apple usually doesn't bring anything into market that Android hasn't done for years. They'll bring something in that say, wow, it's a brand new feature, and anyone with an Android phone will tell you this was something that was around for 2 or 3 years already. So Apple is not really about the innovative design, technological innovation. It's more about design innovation. Yeah. And I think that's been the history. And I don't think its strength really is, something like AI, and that's why it maybe has fallen behind in this particular bit of news. This particular, I think, cycle.
Mm-hmm. And what have you made of, I guess, maybe some of the software and also some of the other services besides the hardware? It's also getting money from things like Apple Music, things like Apple Care as well.
Yeah, look, I mean, these are all nice add-ons, and if they were, any other company in the world, I mean, Apple, which was earbuds, which was the little earphones that it has here. These basically are, if they were their own, would be one of the biggest businesses in the world. But it's just that Apple is such a gigantic business. The volumes it ships with regards to the iPhone are just amazing. And it's like it's a $4 trillion company. Much of the value comes from the iPhone. And so everything else doesn't quite, match up with it. So yes, it does make a little money at other parts of the company, but the iPhone really is the base of it, and not just the base of it in terms of its actual sales, but also the reason you use the other things is because of the iPhone.
Mm-hmm. Now, big news locally, the manufacturing dispute that weighed on Aspen's share price has come to an end and has resulted in the company receiving a 500 million rand settlement. A welcome move, right? That share price, the last time I checked, was up close to 3%.
Yeah, look, I mean, yeah, that drop we had earlier in the year, it still hasn't recovered here. I do think that, it's made some interesting moves with regards to some of the new drugs it's bringing to the market. And I think, about to go, pharmaceutical drugs are about to go in a bit of a renaissance. We're seeing, innovation coming through from a number of aspects, especially around AI. We have Google with this AlphaFold developing these new methods of developing new drugs. We're seeing Eli Lilly building in new, plants, new supercomputers, to try and kind of work on this stuff. So we'd like you to see, a lot of demand coming through in the next few years, but you have to get these contracts right because, obviously, when it comes to pharmaceuticals, a lot of it does come down to agreements about patents, etc.
And I think CEO Stephen Sard said they're eyeing R1 billion in sales on the back of the sales of those drugs, particularly after SAHPRA gave it the green light to start selling Eli Lilly's Mounjaro as a weight loss treatment.
Look, I mean, that is a guaranteed money spent. I mean, at one point in time, I remember when Ozempic, which was the previous version, the older, slightly older generation of these weight loss drugs. Also, we say weight loss, but they're also diabetes drugs as well. So it's a diabetes/weight loss drugs. I mean, they had to basically coordinate with the Danish, central bank because they were bringing so much money into the country. They're affecting the currency. That is the kind of money we're talking about here. So yeah, South Africa is one of the fattest countries in the world. We all know that we're the most overweight people around, or some of the most overweight people around. That's not just an aesthetic thing; it's also a health thing. We have high levels of diabetes, high levels of heart disease. All those kind of things come along with it. And quite frankly, the initial studies on these drugs show that they're not just beneficial in terms of weight loss; they're beneficial in terms of diabetes. In fact, they are diabetes drugs primarily. They reduce heart pressure, they cause heart problems, they reduce blood pressure, they reduce kidney disease. And I mean, I saw a stat recently in the U.S. 1% of the U.S. federal budget, this 1% of all the spending they do, not just around discretionary things, is on dialysis for the elderly. And that is basically a diabetes kind of a weight loss issue.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, if we bring it to South Africa, it's not just going to be about weight loss, it's going to be about many other things as well that I think could be really beneficial to the company and to the government as well in the long run.
All right, let's hit pause on the conversation. Before we move on to your stock pick, let's take a moment to touch on which counters your industry peers are watching closely.
My top pick, Astral. I really like Astral. I think there's a good story behind it. It presents a lot of upside from current levels. So it is a cyclical play, but it's coming from a period where, everything went wrong. And now, as things stand, it sits, everything is moving in the right direction for the company. So it put out a voluntary trading update for the full year yesterday and guided to, growth in the full year headline earnings to be between 5 and 15%. And it had a tough first half where earnings fell 46%. And this was following some heavy promotional activity in terms of chicken prices in the retail market. We also had high yellow maize prices at the time, which peaked at around 5,000 Rand per ton. So if you consider sort of the midpoint of the guided range, which would be around 20 Rand a share, it implies that this business grew its earnings up by above 50% in the second half, which we believe, is the first signal in terms of the earnings print that it will be reporting next year.
TSMC, the foundry business in the semiconductor space, I think as we see CapEx being ramped up by all these hyperscalers, they're going to need to throughput a lot of that through the TSMC's manufacturing side, where they manufacture all these chips for them. So I think that it is a less risky element in that they're getting volumes guaranteed by the hyperscalers, but they don't have to go worry about monetizations once they produce the product. So it's doing fairly well. I mean, trading at a discount relative to the likes of the other semiconductor businesses. I would go with it thinking there would be some long-term momentum in their production and pricing power.
So Zwelakhe betting on the AI boom with TSMC. Lwando, in the meantime, going local with Astral One that operates in a very cyclical market.
Yeah, a very uncertain market as well. Look, I mean, you would say food versus, AI speculation. You would think food would be a bit safer.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, Astral's, movements over the last few years have been more volatile. I mean, you're open to things like disease. You're open to things like, for instance, weather patterns as well. And so it is a higher risking. I think I've been saying for a while now that if you're looking at food as a defensive area, it's not a defensive area anymore. It's just not cyclical. At least you can say, okay, there's a pattern to it. But depending on what the weather patterns look like, depending on whether or not we get some kind of weird disease outbreak in the country because of something that happened in some other part of the world, that can really affect the pricing coming through for Astral Foods. And so it is probably a good idea. If you bet on something being wealthier, you bet on us basically growing over time. One thing people spend more money on is higher tastier food effectively, and that's what will benefit from that in that case. More meat consumption, etc. But I do think that you are in for a bumpier ride because of the fact that you are open to things like weather and disease.
And what about TSMC?
Great company. Look, the way the system works is NVIDIA designs, TSMC builds an ASML, this company in the Netherlands, basically builds a machine that TSMC used to build the chips. TSMC, obviously being in Taiwan, they're very dangerous with regards to any kind of build from China. Because the Americans will not let China get a hold of TSMC's foundries should anything happen in regards to that. So there is that risk. It's not a huge risk, in terms of it's a 50% chance of happening. But in a world where Russia invades Ukraine, where the Chinese government has talked about Taiwan with certain kind of terms for the last several years, there is a danger to keep in mind there. But in terms of its strength in terms of the AI business, it's correct. Whether you're AMD, whether you are NVIDIA, whether you're any new startup out there that wants to basically get into the chip designing business, you're probably going to have to go through TSMC eventually, because they're the guys that can somehow make these chips at a higher quality and get a better quality control than anybody else in the world. Even when they build them in the US, they bring TSMC engineers over to build those factories and run them almost.
All right, let's get your stock pick quickly.
My stock pick is a company called CATL. It stands for Contemporary Amperex Technology. It's a Chinese it's a battery company. The reason I put it there is, again, the tech story. If you're looking at energy demand by these data centers, in some states in the US, it's about a third of all energy. It's actually pushing up energy prices for consumers because the data centers can so much energy up. Now, in the US, you really can't build new power plants, if they're nuclear or coal even, or even gas. One thing you can do is solar. But solar requires batteries, and we're seeing battery demand probably rise substantially. And it's not just about these data centers. In Africa, we're seeing huge adoption in terms of solar and batteries, not just in South Africa because of load shedding, but other parts of the continent as well. And CATL is basically the premier Chinese battery maker. They've got a new battery out, a sodium battery, which apparently is much better in terms of operating in different temperature zones as well as recharging multiple times. But even without that, they do have a huge, stake in the Chinese, EV market. EVs are taking off as well. So this is all combining to being that I think battery demand over the next few years is going to be very substantial. And the Chinese have shown themselves to be the best manufacturers in the world. It's going to be very difficult for anyone else in the world to make solar panels. It's probably going to be very difficult for anyone else in the world to compete in the battery sector as well.
All right, let's leave it there, Viv. Thanks so much for your time and sharing your insights this afternoon. That was Viv Govender from Rand Swiss Offshore.